I never thought my life would turn into one of those stories you hear about but never believe could happen to you. You know the kind where someone sacrifices everything for love, only to have it thrown back in their face? Yeah, that was me. My name is Rebecca, and this is the story of how I lost everything and then found myself again. It started on what seemed like an ordinary Tuesday morning. I was in our small apartment kitchen, making coffee and watching Marcus get ready for work. We had been married for 7 years, and life had settled into a comfortable rhythm. He was a graphic designer at a mid-sized marketing firm, and I ran a small but successful online jewelry business that I had built from scratch. We weren't rich, but we were happy. Or at least, I thought we were. Marcus had been complaining about headaches for a few weeks. I kept telling him to see a doctor, but you know how men are. They think they're invincible until something really goes wrong. That morning, he collapsed in the bathroom. The sound of his body hitting the tile floor is something I'll never forget. It was like the entire world stopped in that moment. I rushed him to the emergency room, my hands shaking so badly I could barely hold the steering wheel. The fluorescent lights of the hospital felt too bright, too harsh. Everything moved in slow motion and fast forward at the same time. Doctors rushed around, asking me questions I couldn't focus on answering. All I could think about was Marcus lying on that gurney, his face pale and his eyes barely open. After what felt like an eternity, a neurologist came out to talk to me. Her face was kind but serious, the kind of expression doctors practice for delivering bad news. She told me Marcus had a brain tumor. The words hit me like a physical blow. Brain tumor. The 2 words that would change everything. She explained that it was an aggressive form, but it was operable. There was hope, but it would require immediate surgery followed by intensive chemotherapy and radiation. The treatment plan would be long, exhausting, and expensive. Very expensive. I sat in that sterile waiting room chair, trying to process everything. Marcus was only 32 years old. We had plans. We were going to buy a house next year. We talked about having kids. This wasn't supposed to happen to us. But life doesn't care about your plans. When I finally got to see him, Marcus looked so small in that hospital bed. His usual confidence was gone, replaced by fear that he tried to hide behind a weak smile. He reached for my hand and I held it tight, trying to transfer every ounce of strength I had into him. Marcus said, "I'm scared, Becca. I know, baby. But we're going to get through this. Whatever it takes, we're going to fight this thing together." He nodded, tears streaming down his face. I had never seen him cry before. In that moment, I made a silent vow. I would do anything, sacrifice anything, to save him. He was my husband, my partner, my best friend, the man I chose to spend my life with. Money, possessions, none of that mattered compared to his life. The surgery was scheduled for the following week. In those few days, I started making calls, first to our insurance company, then to the hospital billing department. The numbers they threw at me were staggering. Our insurance would cover some of it, but the out-of-pocket expenses were astronomical. We had some savings, maybe $30,000, but this was going to cost at least 3 times that amount, possibly more. I looked at everything we owned with new eyes. Our car, our furniture, my jewelry business inventory, even my grandmother's antique ring that I treasured. Everything became a potential resource, a way to save Marcus's life. The choice wasn't even a choice. It was obvious what I had to do. I started with the easy things. I listed our second car online, a reliable sedan that Marcus loved. It sold within 2 days. Then I began liquidating my business inventory. The necklaces, bracelets, and earrings I had spent years designing and crafting went up for sale at bargain prices. My Instagram followers were confused by the sudden fire sale, but I didn't explain. I couldn't find the words. Marcus's surgery went well, the surgeon said. They removed 95% of the tumor, but the remaining 5% would require aggressive treatment. The chemotherapy regimen they recommended was cutting edge, but not fully covered by insurance. Each round cost thousands of dollars. I sold my car next, then our good furniture, keeping only the basics. I emptied our savings account down to the last penny. I took out a loan against my retirement fund. When that wasn't enough, I sold my engagement ring. Marcus was too weak from the surgery to notice at first, and when he did, his face crumpled. Marcus said, "Becca, no, not that. Your grandmother gave that to you." I squeezed his hand. "It's just a ring, Marcus. You're what matters. We can always get another ring. I can't get another you." But the truth was, each thing I sold felt like losing a piece of myself. That ring connected me to my grandmother, who had raised me after my parents died. The business I sold represented years of late nights and creative passion. My car meant independence. But I pushed those feelings down deep. Marcus needed to focus on getting better, not on worrying about our finances. The chemotherapy was brutal. Marcus lost his thick, dark hair within 3 weeks. His skin turned gray, and he lost 40 pounds. He couldn't keep food down most days. I would sit with him during treatments, holding his hand while poison dripped into his veins, poison that was supposed to save him but felt like it was killing him. The treatment center became my second home. I knew every nurse by name, every crack in the waiting room floor, every motivational poster on the walls. There was one poster that showed a mountain climber reaching the summit. It said, "Perseverance conquers all." I stared at that poster during every session, trying to believe it. The other patients and their families became a strange kind of community. There was an older gentleman named Frank who was fighting lung cancer. His wife brought him homemade soup every session, and he'd tell jokes to anyone who would listen. There was a young mother named Keisha with breast cancer, trying to stay strong for her 2 kids. We'd exchange tired smiles across the treatment room, warriors in a battle nobody asked to fight. Marcus's side effects were severe. Some days he'd sleep for 20 hours straight. Other days, the nausea was so bad he couldn't even keep water down. I learned to recognize the signs, to have the basin ready, to know when to call the nurse. I became an expert in anti-nausea medications, in when to push food and when to back off, in how to change bed sheets with a person still in them because he was too weak to move. The financial pressure was crushing. Medical bills arrived daily, each one a reminder of how much we owed, how far we still had to go. I created a spreadsheet to track everything: hospital bills, pharmacy costs, specialist copays, parking fees, gas money for appointments. The numbers climbed higher every week. I'd sit at our kitchen table at 2 in the morning, looking at those numbers, trying to figure out where the next payment would come from. His mother, Patricia, came to visit once. She took one look at our nearly empty apartment and made a comment about how we should have been more financially prepared. I bit my tongue so hard I tasted blood. This was the woman who had told Marcus not to marry me because I wasn't from the right kind of family. The woman who had given us a gravy boat for our wedding present. A gravy boat. Patricia walked through our apartment like she was inspecting a crime scene. Her lips pursed in disapproval. She ran her finger along the wall where our flat-screen TV used to hang, the outline still visible in the paint. Patricia said, "What happened to all your furniture? This place looks abandoned. I had to sell things to cover medical expenses that insurance doesn't pay for." She made a clicking sound with her tongue. "If you had been more financially responsible, you wouldn't be in this position. My son deserves better than this." I felt rage bubbling up inside me, but I swallowed it down. Marcus didn't need the stress of a fight between his wife and his mother. He heard everything anyway. After she left, he apologized, but the damage was done. Her words echoed in my head during my loneliest moments. "You should have been more prepared. He deserves better." I worked 3 jobs to keep us afloat. During the day, I did freelance graphic design work online, something I taught myself through YouTube videos. I wasn't particularly good at it at first, but I got better through sheer necessity. I'd take any project, no matter how tedious or poorly paid. Logo designs for startup companies that would probably never launch. Social media graphics for small businesses. Anything that paid. In the evenings, I waitressed at a diner near the hospital. The place was called Rosie's, a greasy spoon that had been there for 40 years. The owner, an older woman named Rose, knew my situation. She let me take home leftover food at the end of my shift, which saved us grocery money. The work was hard on my feet and my dignity. I'd smile at customers who snapped their fingers at me, who complained about everything, who left terrible tips, but I needed every dollar. My coworker at the diner, a single mom named Tamara, became an unexpected friend. She worked 2 jobs too and understood the exhaustion that settled into your bones. During slow periods, we'd lean against the counter and talk about our lives in hushed tones. Tamara said one night, "Girl, I don't know how you do it. Working all these jobs and taking care of a sick husband. I don't have a choice. This is what love looks like sometimes. That's not what love should look like. Love should be a partnership, not a one-woman rescue mission." Her words stuck with me, but I pushed them away. She didn't understand. Marcus would do the same for me if our positions were reversed. At least that's what I told myself. Late at night, after Marcus was asleep and my waitress shift was done, I did data entry for a company that paid by the task. My eyes would burn from staring at the computer screen, my fingers cramping from typing. I'd make mistakes from exhaustion, have to go back and correct them, losing time and money. But I kept going. I slept maybe 4 hours a night, running on coffee and sheer determination. The sleep deprivation did strange things to me. I'd see things in my peripheral vision that weren't there. I'd forget conversations I'd had hours before. One time, I put my car keys in the refrigerator and spent 20 minutes looking for them. My body was shutting down, but I couldn't stop. Stopping meant the bills didn't get paid. Stopping meant Marcus didn't get his treatment. Stopping wasn't an option. My friends tried to help. My best friend Jennifer brought food and offered money, but I was too proud to take it. This was my responsibility, my husband, my problem to solve. Looking back, I see how foolish that pride was, but at the time, it felt like accepting help would mean admitting defeat. Jennifer said, "Rebecca, you can't do this alone. Let people help you." I appreciate it, Jen. I really do, but I've got this under control. She gave me a look that said she didn't believe me, but she didn't push. She just hugged me and told me she was there whenever I needed her. Months passed in a blur of medical appointments, insurance paperwork, and exhaustion. Marcus slowly started to respond to the treatment. His color improved. He could keep food down more consistently. The doctors started using words like remission and promising results. For the first time in almost a year, I felt like I could breathe. I had sold everything we owned except our bed, a couch, and 2 folding chairs. Our apartment looked like squatters lived there. But Marcus was getting better. That was all that mattered. We could rebuild. We were young. We had time. Marcus started physical therapy to regain his strength. I watched him work with the therapist, forcing his weakened muscles to remember how to function properly. He was determined, pushing himself harder each session. The man I married was coming back, and my heart soared with hope. Then one evening, about 14 months after his initial diagnosis, the doctors declared him in complete remission. The tumor was gone, the scans were clear. He would need regular checkups, but for now, he was cancer-free. We sat in the parking lot of the hospital after that appointment, and I finally let myself cry. Not the scared, desperate tears I had cried so many times before, but tears of relief and joy. Marcus pulled me close. "We made it, Becca. We actually made it. I told you we would. I knew we'd beat this thing." He kissed my forehead. "I don't know what I would have done without you. You saved my life." Those words meant everything to me. All the sacrifice, all the exhaustion, all the fear had been worth it. We had our future back. We could start rebuilding our life together. Marcus went back to work part-time at first, then full-time within 2 months. He seemed energized, grateful for every day. He started going to the gym, getting back in shape. He talked about all the things he wanted to do now that he had a second chance at life. He wanted to travel, to experience everything, to live fully. I was thrilled to see him so alive again. At first, his renewed energy felt like a blessing. He'd wake up early, go for runs, come home invigorated. He'd talk about projects at work with enthusiasm I hadn't seen in years. Part of me was relieved. The man I married was coming back. The cancer hadn't taken him from me after all. But as weeks turned into months, I started to notice something shift. His energy wasn't directed toward us. It was directed outward, away from me. He'd come home from the gym and immediately shower, as if he couldn't stand to have my eyes on him. He'd talk about work constantly, but never invited me to company events anymore. When I asked about his day, his answers became vague and dismissive. I tried to reconnect. I suggested we go out to dinner, maybe celebrate his recovery properly. We hadn't been on a date in over 2 years. Marcus made an excuse about needing to save money, which was rich considering I was the one working multiple jobs to pay off his medical debt. I said, "We can go somewhere cheap. I just want to spend time with you. I feel like we're ships passing in the night. I'm just really busy right now, Becca. Work is demanding. Can we do it another time?" Another time never came. There was always a reason to postpone, to delay, to put off reconnecting. I told myself he needed time to adjust. Cancer changes a person. He was figuring out who he was in this new phase of life. I could be patient. I had been patient through everything else. I was working on rebuilding my jewelry business, starting completely from scratch. I had sold all my inventory and equipment, so I was using borrowed tools and cheap materials. It was humbling to start over, but I was doing it. Slowly, order by order, I was clawing my way back. Every piece I created felt like an act of defiance. Each necklace, each bracelet was proof that I could rebuild, that Marcus's illness hadn't destroyed everything. I photographed my work on a cheap sheet I'd bought from a discount store, using natural light from our apartment window, because I couldn't afford proper lighting equipment. The photos weren't professional, but they showed the heart in each piece. I listed items on Etsy for half of what they were worth, just trying to generate some cash flow. A pair of earrings that took me 3 hours to make sold for $20. After Etsy's fees and materials cost, I made maybe $8 profit, but it was $8 we didn't have before. $8 closer to paying off another medical bill. About 4 months after Marcus returned to work, I noticed changes. Small things at first. He started staying late at the office. He was on his phone constantly, smiling at texts, angling the screen away from me. He bought new clothes, expensive ones that we couldn't really afford, designer jeans, a leather jacket that cost $300. When I questioned the purchases, he got defensive. Marcus said, "I almost died, Rebecca. I think I deserve to enjoy my life a little." Of course you do. I just think maybe we should focus on paying down our debt first. You mean my debt? The debt I created by getting sick. His words stung. That's not what I meant. And you know it. Do I? Because it feels like you're keeping score, like you're holding everything you did over my head. I'm not holding anything over your head. I'm just trying to be responsible about our finances. He stormed out, leaving me standing in our empty apartment, confused and hurt. This wasn't the man I married. This wasn't even the man I'd nursed through cancer. This was someone new, someone I didn't recognize. He started wearing cologne again, something he hadn't done since before his diagnosis. A different brand than he used to wear, something expensive and musky. He'd come home smelling like it, and sometimes there'd be traces of perfume on his clothes. Women's perfume. Something floral, and definitely not mine. I told myself I was being paranoid. He worked with women. Of course, their perfume might transfer during normal office interactions. But the voice in my head, the one I kept trying to silence, kept whispering that something was wrong. Marcus started working out obsessively. 2 hours at the gym every day after work. He'd come home at 8 or 9 at night, muscles pumped, skin flushed, but he wouldn't look at me, wouldn't touch me. We hadn't been intimate since before his diagnosis, and I understood why. Cancer treatment destroys your libido, but he was healthy now, and still, nothing. One night, I tried to initiate. I put on the one nice piece of lingerie I hadn't sold, lit some candles, tried to create a romantic atmosphere in our depressing, empty apartment. When Marcus came home, he looked at me like I was a stranger, not with desire or even interest, with something like pity mixed with annoyance. He said, "I'm really tired, Becca. I'm not in the mood. We haven't been together in over 2 years, Marcus. I miss you. I miss us. Can you not pressure me right now? I'm still recovering. But you're not. The doctors cleared you months ago. You're at the gym 2 hours a day. You're working full-time. You're recovered. So what's really going on?" "Nothing's going on. I'm just not in the mood." "Is that a crime?" He went to the bedroom and closed the door. I stood there in my lingerie, candles burning around me, feeling more alone than I'd ever felt in my life. The rejection was crushing. I had given everything for this man. Everything. And he couldn't even pretend to want me. I blew out the candles and changed into my old pajamas. I slept on the couch that night because I couldn't bear to lie next to him, feeling the distance between us like a physical thing. He didn't come out to check on me, didn't apologize, didn't acknowledge that anything was wrong. The next morning, he acted like nothing had happened, made his coffee, got ready for work, kissed my forehead in that perfunctory way that held no real affection. I felt like a roommate. Worse than a roommate. At least roommates don't share crushing medical debt and a history of sacrifice. I tried to ignore the little voice in my head whispering warnings. He had been through trauma. He was reconnecting with life. This was normal, I told myself. But the voice got louder. One night I asked him about it. We were sitting on our cheap couch, eating takeout because we still didn't have a proper dining table. I said, "Marcus, is everything okay? You seem distant lately." He barely looked up from his phone. "Everything's fine. Just busy at work. They're giving me more responsibility now that I'm back full-time." "That's great. Maybe we could spend this weekend together." "We haven't had quality time in forever." Marcus hesitated. "Actually, I have plans on Saturday. Some guys from work are getting together." That was the first lie. I didn't know it then, but I would replay that moment 1,000 times later, seeing the truth I missed. The distance grew. We stopped talking about the future. We stopped having meals together. He started showering as soon as he got home from work. Classic signs, but I didn't want to see them. After everything we had been through, after everything I had sacrificed, the idea that he might be cheating was too painful to contemplate. I tried to rationalize everything. He's readjusting to normal life. He's processing his trauma. He needs space to figure out who he is after cancer. I made excuses for every red flag because acknowledging the truth would mean facing something I didn't have the strength to face. One evening, I tried to initiate intimacy. We hadn't been physical in over a year, and I missed that connection. I thought maybe if we could reconnect physically, emotionally would follow. But Marcus pulled away from me. making an excuse about being tired. The rejection stung more than I wanted to admit. I said, "Marcus, we need to talk about us. About where we are." He looked uncomfortable. "What do you mean?" "I mean we're roommates, not husband and wife. You're distant. You're always on your phone. You're never home. I feel like I don't know you anymore. You're being paranoid. I'm just adjusting to being back at work full-time. It's a lot of pressure." I wanted to believe him. I desperately wanted to believe him. So I dropped it, even though my gut was screaming that something was wrong. Jennifer noticed the change in me. We met for coffee one Saturday morning, a rare moment where I wasn't working or caring for Marcus. I looked like a ghost of myself, dark circles under my eyes, clothes hanging off my frame because I'd lost weight from stress. Jennifer said, "Becca, you look exhausted. When's the last time you slept a full night?" "I don't remember. Marcus has been good about letting me sleep more now that he's better, but I've got so much work to catch up on." "That's not what I asked. When did you last take care of yourself?" I stared at my coffee. "I don't have time for that. You need to make time. You can't pour from an empty cup. And between you and me, I'm worried about you." "I'm fine." She gave me a look. "You're not fine. You're running yourself into the ground. And for what? Marcus is healthy now. When does it become about you again?" "Soon. Once we get back on our feet financially." But that day never came. There was always another bill, another expense, another reason to put myself last. I found the evidence on a Tuesday evening. Isn't it funny how life-changing moments seem to happen on Tuesdays? I was doing laundry, something mundane and ordinary, when I found a receipt in his pocket from a restaurant. A receipt for 2 people, expensive meals, wine. On a day he told me he was working late. My hands started shaking as I looked at the date and time. That was last Thursday. He'd texted me that night saying he'd be home late because of a deadline. I had heated up leftovers for one, eating alone in our empty apartment, while he was at a steakhouse ordering filet mignon and a $100 bottle of wine. I sat on the floor of our bedroom, that receipt clutched in my fist, feeling like the floor was opening up beneath me. The date, the amount, the fact that it was for 2 people, all of it screamed what I didn't want to see. I wanted to be wrong. I desperately wanted there to be an explanation. I went through his pockets more carefully. I found another receipt from a florist. 2 dozen roses. I couldn't remember the last time Marcus had bought me flowers. There was a hotel keycard tucked into his wallet from a place downtown. My stomach turned. Part of me wanted to put everything back, to pretend I never saw it, to go on living in blissful ignorance. But I couldn't unsee what I'd seen. I couldn't unknow what I now knew. I checked his credit card statements online. The password was still his birthday, something I'd set up for him when he was too weak from chemo to manage bills. There they were. Charges at expensive restaurants, hotels, a jewelry store where he'd spent $1,200. None of these purchases were for me. The evidence was overwhelming, undeniable. Marcus was having an affair, and he wasn't even being discreet about it. Or maybe he just didn't think I'd ever check. Maybe he thought I was too exhausted, too beaten down, too grateful that he was alive to question anything. I felt like I was going to vomit. I ran to the bathroom and dry heaved over the toilet, my body rejecting this new reality. This couldn't be happening. Not after everything. Not after I gave up everything to save his life. When Marcus came home that night, I was sitting on the couch with the receipts spread out on the coffee table. My face must have told him everything because he stopped in the doorway, his expression shifting from surprise to guilt to something like fear. I said, very calmly, "Who is she?" He didn't even try to deny it. Maybe he was relieved to finally have it out in the open. Maybe he was just too cowardly to lie to my face. Marcus said, "Her name is Daniela. She's from work." The confirmation felt like being hit by a truck. I had known, somewhere deep down, but hearing him say it out loud was different. It made it real. It took the nightmare in my head and dragged it into the light. How long? 3 months. 3 months. I did the math in my head. He'd been sleeping with her almost since the moment he was cleared to return to work. While I was wearing myself to the bone trying to rebuild what I'd destroyed to save his life, he was falling into bed with someone else. I picked up one of the receipts. "This restaurant? The one that cost $200 for dinner? We can't even afford to fix our broken dishwasher, but you can spend this kind of money on her?" "Rebecca, I can explain." "Oh, please do explain. I'm dying to hear how you justify this." 3 months. While I was working myself to exhaustion trying to rebuild what I had destroyed to save his life, he was having dinner with Daniela. While I was wearing clothes from thrift stores because I couldn't afford new ones, he was buying expensive meals for another woman. I felt rage building inside me, hot and consuming. But under the rage was something worse, a hollow, aching pain that seemed to swallow everything. How could you? After everything we've been through? After everything I gave up for you? Marcus had the audacity to look annoyed. That's exactly the problem, Rebecca. You gave up everything. You made me into this project, this thing you had to save. I couldn't breathe under the weight of all your sacrifice. His words were like knives. I stared at him. This man I had slept next to for years. This man whose hand I had held through countless chemotherapy sessions, and I didn't recognize him. I said, "Are you seriously blaming me for saving your life? I'm not blaming you for anything. I'm grateful for what you did. But Daniela sees me for who I am now, not as a sick person who needs to be taken care of. She makes me feel alive." I laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. Alive. That's rich. You're only alive because I sold everything I owned, because I worked 3 jobs, because I loved you enough to sacrifice my entire life for yours. And that's the problem, Marcus shouted. Don't you get it? I didn't ask for all that sacrifice. Now I feel like I owe you for the rest of my life. It's suffocating. The words hung in the air between us. I felt something inside me break, something fundamental and irreparable. This man, this person I had devoted everything to, saw my love as a burden, my sacrifice as chains. I said, very quietly, "Get out. Rebecca, we need to talk about this. Get out. Now." He grabbed some clothes and left. I sat on that couch in our empty apartment, surrounded by the ghosts of everything I had sold, everything I had given up, and I cried. Not the gentle tears of sadness, but the deep, wrenching sobs of someone whose entire world has collapsed. Jennifer came over when I called her, even though it was 2 a.m. She held me while I broke apart, not saying anything, just being there. When I could finally speak, I told her everything. Jennifer said, "I'm so sorry, Becca, but you need to know this isn't your fault. He's the one who made this choice. I gave up everything for him. Everything. And it wasn't enough. You were enough. You were more than enough. He's just a coward who couldn't handle the weight of real love." Her words helped, but they didn't stop the pain. Nothing could stop the pain. Marcus came back 2 days later to get more of his things. He stood in the doorway, looking uncomfortable. Marcus said, "I want a divorce." 4 words. That's all it took to officially end 7 years of marriage and nearly 2 years of hell. I looked at him standing there, healthy and strong, wearing the body I had bankrupted myself to save, and I felt nothing. The love I had felt for him was gone, burned away by his betrayal. I said, "Fine, but I want you to know something. I don't regret saving your life, not because you deserved it, because clearly you didn't, but because I deserve to be the kind of person who would fight for the person they love. You took a lot from me, Marcus. My money, my business, my things, but you didn't take that. I'm still that person, and you'll have to live with being the kind of person who throws that away." He looked like he wanted to say something, but I turned away. I was done. He didn't get any more of my words, my time, or my energy. The divorce process was surprisingly quick. We had nothing to fight over because I had already sold everything to save him. The irony wasn't lost on me. Our lawyers finalized everything in 3 months. I signed the papers sitting at Jennifer's kitchen table, using her pen because I couldn't afford my own legal supplies. The lawyer Marcus hired was expensive, clearly paid for by money he should have been using to help with our debt. My lawyer was from Legal Aid, a tired woman named Susan who handled dozens of cases like mine. She was kind but overwhelmed, and I knew I wasn't getting the representation Marcus was getting. But what did it matter? There was nothing to divide. No house, no savings, no investments, just debt. And somehow, legally, most of that debt ended up in my name because it was tied to credit cards I'd opened during his treatment. Susan explained it to me in her cramped office that smelled like old coffee and desperation. "The medical bills that went to collections are in your name. The credit cards you maxed out are in your name. Legally, he's not responsible for those, but I only took those out to pay for his treatment, for medication and procedures that saved his life. I understand that, and it's deeply unfair. But unless you can prove he explicitly agreed to be responsible for those debts, which you can't because everything was happening so fast and you were just trying to save his life, the courts see them as your individual debt. So I sacrificed everything, and now I get to keep the debt too." She looked at me with genuine sympathy. "I'm sorry. I see this more often than you'd think. One spouse gets sick, the other spouse goes into debt trying to save them. Then the sick spouse leaves once they're healthy. The system isn't set up to protect the caregiver. I signed the papers dividing our non-existent assets. Marcus kept his car, the one I'd somehow managed not to sell. I kept the debt, the memories, and a wedding ring that was worth maybe $200. Fair trade, I thought bitterly. Jennifer said, "What are you going to do now?" Honestly, I have no idea. Start over, I guess. Again. You can stay here as long as you need to. Her kindness made me tear up. I had been so focused on Marcus, on our marriage, that I had neglected the people who actually cared about me. Jennifer had been there all along, offering help I was too proud to accept. She was still here, even after I had pushed her away. I said, "Thank you, Jen, for everything. I'm sorry I shut you out." She hugged me tight. That's what friends do. We stick around even when you're being stubborn and stupid. I laughed through my tears. It felt good to laugh again. The finality of divorce hit me in waves. Some days I'd be fine, focused on moving forward. Other days I'd find myself crying in random places. The grocery store when I passed Marcus's favorite cereal. The gas station where we used to stop on road trips. The park where he proposed. Every place held memories, and those memories were now contaminated by his betrayal. I had to figure out where to live long term. Jennifer's spare room was temporary, and I knew it. I looked at apartments I could afford on what little money I had, and was depressed by what I found. Studio apartments in bad neighborhoods with thin walls and questionable stains. Basement units that smelled like mildew. Rooms in shared houses with strangers. I visited one apartment that was in my price range. The landlord, a man who smelled like cigarettes and looked at me in a way that made my skin crawl, showed me a studio that was maybe 300 square feet. The carpet was stained, the windows didn't close properly, and there was a mysterious dark spot on the ceiling that definitely indicated water damage. He said it's $500 a month, first and last month's rent plus security deposit. $1,500 total to move in. I did the math in my head. I had maybe $800 saved. I'd need at least 2 more months of saving to afford this dump. And that was if nothing went wrong, if I didn't get sick, if my car didn't break down, if life didn't throw another curveball. I'll think about it. He shrugged. Won't last long at this price. Let me know by tomorrow. I left that building feeling defeated. This was my life now. Looking at apartments I couldn't afford in buildings I wouldn't want to live in, trying to restart from less than zero because I was in debt up to my eyeballs. Jennifer found me crying in my car outside the building. She'd followed me to the viewing, worried about the neighborhood. She got in the passenger seat and handed me tissues. Jennifer said, "You're not taking that place. It's all I can afford. Then you'll stay with me longer. You're not moving into some place where the landlord looks at you like that. I can't keep imposing on you. You're not imposing. You're surviving. And that apartment isn't survival. That's giving up. You didn't go through all of this to give up now." Her fierce loyalty made me cry harder. I didn't deserve a friend like her, but I was grateful beyond words that I had her. Starting over at 33 years old with literally nothing was terrifying. I had no savings, no business, no assets. I was living in my best friend's spare room, sleeping on an air mattress. But for the first time in 2 years, I felt like I could breathe. The weight of Marcus's illness, his recovery, and his betrayal was off my shoulders. I was free. The first few weeks at Jennifer's were the hardest. I'd wake up disoriented, forgetting for a moment where I was, why I was there. Then reality would crash back down. Divorced, broke, starting over. Some mornings, I'd lie on that air mattress and wonder if I had the strength to get up and face another day. But Jennifer wouldn't let me wallow. She'd knock on my door with coffee and breakfast, forcing me to eat, to shower, to face the world. She was the friend everyone needs and few people deserve. Jennifer said one morning, "You're going to get through this. I know it doesn't feel like it now, but you will." How do you know? Because I know you. You're the strongest person I've ever met. You just don't see it yet. I started small. I took a job as a sales associate at a jewelry store in the mall. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid rent money and it kept me connected to the industry I loved. The work was easy compared to what I'd been doing. Show customers pieces, answer questions, ring up sales. No one's life depended on my performance. There was freedom in that. My manager, a woman named Carolyn in her 50s, took an interest in me. She had been in the jewelry business for 30 years and had that kind of wisdom that only comes from lived experience. She watched me work for a few days before approaching me. Carolyn said one day, during a slow afternoon shift, "You've got an eye for design. Have you ever thought about creating your own pieces?" I used to have my own business, actually, before life got complicated. What happened? I gave her the abbreviated version, leaving out the most painful details. My husband got sick. I sold my business to pay for treatment. We're divorced now. I'm starting over. She listened without interrupting, her expression thoughtful. When I finished, she said something that changed everything. You know what I see when I look at you? Strength. You went through hell and came out the other side. That's not weakness. That's power. You should use it. Her words stayed with me. I started sketching designs again during my breaks, using scraps of paper and a cheap pencil I'd grabbed from the clearance bin. Small pieces at first, simple but elegant. A bracelet with interlocking circles representing resilience. Earrings shaped like rising suns. A necklace with a single strong chain. I hadn't drawn anything in almost 2 years. The act of creating again felt like coming home after a long journey. My hand remembered the movements, the way to translate an idea into a visual design. Each sketch was like a conversation with the part of myself I thought I'd lost. Carolyn saw my sketches one day when I'd left my notebook on the break room table. She flipped through them slowly, studying each one with a professional eye. She said, "These are really good, Rebecca. You have talent. Real talent. Thank you. I used to do this full-time before everything happened. Why'd you stop?" I didn't have a choice. I had to sell everything to pay for my ex-husband's cancer treatment. She looked at me for a long moment. "Can I ask you something? If you could go back, would you make the same choice?" I thought about it honestly. Yes. Not because he deserved it, but because I needed to know I was the kind of person who would fight for someone I loved. Does that make sense? It makes perfect sense. That says something about your character. Most people talk about sacrifice, but you actually lived it. Her validation meant more than she probably knew. I'd spent so long being told by Patricia that I hadn't done enough, by Marcus that I'd done too much. Carolyn saw the truth somewhere in between. She offered to let me use the store's workshop after hours to create a few samples. The workshop was small but well-equipped, with all the tools I'd sold to pay Marcus's medical bills. Pliers, wire cutters, torches, polishing wheels. Being in that space felt like coming home. I poured my pain, my anger, my survival into those pieces. Each one told a story. A bracelet about resilience, made with strong steel links that wouldn't break easily. Earrings about transformation, with designs that shifted depending on the angle. A necklace about rising from ashes, with a pendant shaped like flames reaching upward. They were raw and honest and beautiful. They were everything I couldn't say in words, but could express through metal and stone. Each piece was a part of my story made tangible. I worked late into the night, sometimes until 2 or 3 in the morning. Jennifer would text me reminders to come home and sleep. But in that workshop, I wasn't tired. I was alive in a way I hadn't been in years. Creating gave me purpose beyond just surviving. Carolyn helped me photograph the pieces professionally. She knew a guy who owed her a favor, and he shot them with proper lighting and backgrounds. The photos made my jewelry look expensive, aspirational, like something you'd see in a boutique magazine. She also helped me set up an Etsy shop to sell them. I called it Phoenix Rising Jewelry. The symbolism wasn't subtle, but it was true. I was rising from the ashes of my old life, transforming pain into something beautiful. The first order came in 3 days after I launched. A woman from Oregon bought a pair of earrings I'd named Survivor. She left a review that made me cry happy tears. The first happy tears I'd shed in what felt like forever. She wrote, "These earrings are more than jewelry. They're wearable strength. I wear them to my chemo appointments, and they remind me that I can get through this. Thank you for creating something so meaningful." I read that review 10 times, each time feeling something shift inside me. My pain, my struggle, my survival was helping someone else. That gave everything I'd been through a meaning I hadn't expected to find. Orders started coming in steadily. Nothing huge, but enough to give me hope. 2 orders one day, 5 the next. Someone commissioned a custom piece for their sister who was going through a divorce. Each sale felt like validation that I was on the right path. I worked every spare moment, creating pieces in Carolyn's workshop, packaging orders at Jennifer's apartment, building something new from nothing. 6 months after my divorce was finalized, I moved into my own apartment. It was tiny, a studio in a not great neighborhood, but it was mine. I furnished it with thrift store finds and secondhand treasures. Every piece had a story, and none of those stories involved Marcus. Jennifer helped me move in, which took about 20 minutes since I barely owned anything. She said, standing in the middle of my empty studio, "It's perfect, Becca. It's a dump. It's yours. That makes it perfect." She was right. It was mine. Every inch of it earned through my own work, my own determination. Nobody could take it from me. My business grew slowly but steadily. I started getting custom orders, people wanting pieces that told their own stories of survival and strength. Each one I created felt like healing, like taking my pain and transforming it into something beautiful. I heard through mutual friends that Marcus had married Daniela. They had a big wedding at a country club, the kind of wedding we could never have afforded. I felt a twinge when I heard, but it wasn't jealousy. It was pity. He was building a life on a foundation of lies and betrayal. That kind of foundation doesn't hold. One afternoon, about a year after the divorce, I was working in my apartment when I got an unexpected call. It was a producer from a local news station. They were doing a segment on small business success stories and wanted to feature Phoenix Rising jewelry. I almost said no. The idea of being on camera, of telling my story publicly, terrified me. But then I thought about all the messages I had received from customers. Women who had been through divorces, illness, loss. Women who wore my jewelry as armor, as reminders of their own strength. Maybe my story could help someone else. The interview aired on a Friday evening. I sat on my secondhand couch, watching myself on television talking about sacrifice, betrayal, and rebuilding. It was surreal and uncomfortable, but also empowering. I wasn't hiding anymore. I wasn't ashamed. The response was overwhelming. My website crashed from traffic. Orders flooded in. Messages from women sharing their own stories of survival filled my inbox. I cried reading them, overwhelmed by the connection, the solidarity, the shared strength. Jennifer called me immediately after the segment ended. "I saw it. Becca, you were amazing. I'm so proud of you. I can't believe I actually did that. You told your truth. That takes courage." Her words reminded me how far I had come. A year ago, I was broken on her couch, convinced my life was over. Now I was building something real, something meaningful, something mine. My business exploded after that news segment. I hired 2 part-time employees to help with production. I moved into a small commercial space, an actual workshop where I could create and store inventory. I started selling to boutiques in addition to my online shop. Money was still tight, but I wasn't drowning anymore. I was swimming, making progress, moving forward. I went on a date for the first time since Marcus, a guy named Thomas who came into the shop looking for a gift for his sister. He was kind and funny, and I enjoyed his company, but I wasn't ready for anything serious. The wounds were still too fresh, the trust too broken. Thomas was everything Marcus wasn't. He was patient, interested in my story without pitying me, and respectful of my boundaries. We went to a casual Italian restaurant, nothing fancy, and talked for 3 hours over pasta and cheap wine. He asked about my jewelry business, and I told him the condensed version of how it started. He listened without interrupting, without trying to fix anything or offer unsolicited advice. Just listened. Thomas said, "You're remarkable. You know that, right?" "I don't feel remarkable. I feel like I'm barely holding it together most days. That's what makes it remarkable. You keep showing up even when it's hard." The evening was pleasant, comfortable even, but when he walked me to my car and leaned in for a kiss, I panicked. My heart started racing, not in a good way. I pulled back, apologizing. "I'm sorry. I thought I was ready for this, but I'm not." Thomas stepped back immediately, his hands up in a non-threatening gesture. "No apology necessary." "I appreciate you being honest." I felt tears welling up, frustrated with myself. I want to be ready. I want to be normal again. Healing isn't linear. Take all the time you need. If you want to try again when you're ready, great. If not, that's okay too. No pressure either way. His kindness made me cry harder. I'd gotten so used to Marcus's selfishness that basic human decency felt overwhelming. Thomas understood and didn't push. We stayed friends, which felt right. He'd text me occasionally, always casual, always respectful, never demanding anything I wasn't ready to give. That failed date made me realize how much work I still had to do on myself. I started seeing a therapist, something I should have done months earlier but couldn't afford. Now that my business was generating steady income, I made it a priority. My therapist, Dr. Nina Washington, was a Black woman in her 40s with kind eyes and a no-nonsense approach. She didn't let me hide behind deflection or humor. She made me sit with uncomfortable truths. Dr. Washington said in our 3rd session, "You've talked a lot about what Marcus did to you, but I want you to think about what you did to yourself." "What do you mean?" "I saved his life." "You did. And in the process, you completely erased yourself. You worked yourself to the bone. You accepted crumbs of affection. You ignored every warning sign. Why? Because I loved him. Did you? Or did you love the idea of being the kind of person who could save someone?" Her question hit me like a punch to the gut. I wanted to argue, to defend myself, but the truth in her words was undeniable. I had made Marcus's illness about proving something to myself, proving I was worthy of love through sacrifice. Over months of therapy, I started to understand the patterns I'd fallen into. How I'd learned as a child after my parents died that love meant sacrifice. How my grandmother had worked herself to exhaustion to raise me, and I'd internalized that as what love looked like. How I'd sought validation through how much I could endure, rather than through being valued for who I was. Dr. Washington taught me about boundaries, about the difference between love and codependency, about how healthy relationships require two whole people choosing each other, not one person saving another. These concepts felt revolutionary. She assigned me homework. Write a letter to myself at 25 before Marcus got sick. Tell her what I wish she'd known. I wrote that letter sitting in my small apartment, tears streaming down my face. I wrote, "Dear younger me, your worth is not measured by how much you can sacrifice. The right person won't require you to erase yourself to love them. Being strong doesn't mean never asking for help. You deserve a partner who sees your sacrifices as gifts, not as obligations that create resentment. Trust your gut when something feels wrong. And most importantly, save yourself first, because you can't pour from an empty cup." Reading that letter back to myself felt like talking to a stranger. That woman, the one who married Marcus, seemed so far away now, so naive and hopeful and unaware of what was coming. Carolyn, who had become a mentor and friend, told me something important during one of our coffee meetings. She said, "You know what the difference is between you and so many people who go through trauma? You didn't let it make you bitter. You let it make you better." I don't feel better most days. I feel exhausted. Better doesn't mean perfect. It means you're growing instead of shrinking. You're creating instead of destroying. That's better. Her wisdom helped me through the hard days, and there were still plenty of hard days. Days when I wondered if I had made the right choices. Days when the anger at Marcus felt fresh and raw. Days when I mourned everything I had lost. But I also had good days. Days when a customer told me my jewelry helped her through chemotherapy. Days when I made a piece that felt perfect. Days when I looked around my workshop and felt proud of what I had built. About 18 months after the divorce, I got a message on social media from Marcus. My first instinct was to delete it without reading, but curiosity got the better of me. He wrote, "Rebecca, I know I have no right to reach out, but I need to tell you something. Daniela left me. She said I was too needy, too dependent on her for validation. The irony isn't lost on me. I've been in therapy working through everything, and I realize now what I had with you, what I threw away. I'm not asking for anything. I just wanted you to know that I'm sorry. You deserve so much better than what I gave you." I read the message 3 times, waiting to feel something. Satisfaction, vindication, anger, something. But all I felt was indifference. Marcus was part of my past, a chapter that was closed. His apology didn't change anything. It didn't give me back the years I lost or the things I sacrificed. It was just words, too little and too late. I didn't respond. He didn't deserve my energy, not even enough to type a reply. I deleted the message and went back to work on a custom order, a necklace for a woman celebrating 5 years cancer-free. That was where my focus belonged, on the present and future, not the past. Jennifer noticed the change in me during one of our regular dinners. She said, "You seem different lately, more settled. I feel different, like I finally figured out who I am without him. Who are you?" I thought about it. I'm someone who can survive anything, someone who turns pain into art, someone who doesn't need anyone else to be complete, but who's open to connection. I'm enough, all by myself. Jennifer raised her glass. To being enough. We clinked glasses, and I felt the truth of it settle into my bones. I was enough. I had always been enough. Marcus couldn't see it, but that was his failure, not mine. My business continued to grow. I hired more employees. I started teaching jewelry-making workshops for cancer survivors and domestic violence survivors, giving back to communities that understood struggle. Those workshops became some of the most meaningful work I did, watching women transform wire and stones into symbols of their own resilience. The workshops started small, just 3 women in Carolyn's back room, working with basic supplies. I taught them the fundamentals: how to work with wire, how to choose stones that spoke to them, how to turn raw materials into something beautiful. But what happened in those sessions went deeper than technique. The first woman to sign up was named Linda. She was 62 and had just finished treatment for ovarian cancer. Her hands shook when she tried to manipulate the wire, whether from nerve damage or emotion. I couldn't tell. Probably both. Linda said, I don't know if I can do this. My hands don't work like they used to. That's okay. We'll go at your pace. There's no rush, no pressure. This is about the process, not perfection. By the end of that first session, Linda had created a simple bracelet. It wasn't technically flawless, but it was hers. She wore it out of the workshop, and when she came back the next week, she told me she hadn't taken it off once. It reminded her that she was more than her diagnosis, more than her treatment, more than her fear. Word spread through cancer support groups and domestic violence shelters. More women signed up. I expanded to 2 sessions a week, then 3, then 4. Jennifer helped me apply for grants to subsidize the cost for women who couldn't afford the materials. We got funding from a local cancer foundation and a women's shelter. One woman in particular, Maria, became a regular at my workshops. She had been through an abusive marriage that left her with nothing but scars, physical and emotional. She never talked much about her ex-husband, but I could see the shadows in her eyes, the way she flinched at sudden movements, the careful way she chose her words. Maria worked with intensity, pouring her trauma into beautiful, fierce pieces. She favored sharp angles and strong metals, creating jewelry that looked like armor. Each piece she made seemed to build her confidence, layer by layer. After one class, she stayed behind to help me clean up. We worked in comfortable silence for a while before she spoke. Maria said, "This is the first time I've felt like myself in years. Thank you for creating this space. You did the work. I just provided the tools. No, you provided hope. That's more important than tools. You showed me that broken things can be remade into something stronger." Her words reminded me why I did this work. It wasn't just about jewelry, it was about healing, transformation, and showing women that they could rebuild from rubble, that they could take the broken pieces of their lives and forge them into something new. I started partnering with local hospitals to offer workshops right in the cancer center. The same treatment room where I'd sat with Marcus, holding his hand through chemotherapy, became a space where I taught other women to create beauty from pain. There was something poetic about that transformation of space, that reclaiming of a place that held so much trauma. The hospital workshops were different from the ones I taught in my studio. These women were in the middle of their battles, not on the other side. They came with IV poles and bald heads, and eyes that had seen too much suffering. But when they started creating, something shifted. For an hour or two, they weren't patients. They were artists. One young woman, maybe 25, was going through her second round of breast cancer. Her name was Alicia, and she had the kind of dark humor that comes from staring death in the face. She made a necklace with pink stones and called it her middle finger to cancer. Alicia said, "I'm going to wear this to every single appointment. When I ring that bell saying I'm done with treatment, I'm ringing it wearing this." And she did. 6 months later, she sent me a photo of herself at the cancer center, ringing the bell, wearing her necklace, and a huge smile. I cried when I saw it. Happy tears, proud tears, grateful tears that I could be part of her journey in some small way. The workshops also attracted women going through divorces, particularly divorces that left them financially devastated. They understood the feeling of starting over from nothing, of having to rebuild an identity that had been tied to someone else. We formed a community of survivors, supporting each other through our various battles. I hired Maria to help run the workshops. She had a gift for teaching and an empathy that came from her own experience. Women opened up to her in ways they sometimes didn't with me. She understood betrayal in a way I was still learning to understand. 3 years after my divorce, I opened a second location. It felt surreal to stand in my own storefront, looking at the displays of jewelry I had created, the workshop where women gathered to heal and create, the small team of employees who believed in what we were building. This was success, real success, earned through blood, sweat, and tears. My mom would have been proud. She died when I was 12, too young to teach me everything about being a woman, about surviving hardship, about finding strength in darkness. But somehow, I had learned those lessons anyway. Maybe they were written in my DNA, passed down through generations of women who survived impossible things. I started dating someone seriously, a man named David who owned a bookstore 2 blocks from my shop. He was patient with my trust issues, understanding when I needed space, present when I needed support. He had been through his own divorce and understood that broken people can heal without becoming bitter. David said one evening as we walked home from dinner, "You know what I love about you? You don't need me. You want me, which is different and better. Is that a good thing? It's the best thing. The strongest relationships are built by 2 whole people choosing each other, not 2 broken people needing each other to function." His words felt true. I didn't need David to complete me or save me. I chose him because he added to my life, not because he filled a void. That was healthy. That was real. I ran into Marcus's mother, Patricia, at a grocery store about 4 years after the divorce. She looked older, more tired. She approached me hesitantly. Patricia said, "Rebecca, how are you?" "I'm well, thank you. I heard about your business. It's very successful. I've been fortunate." She paused, seeming to struggle with something. "I want to apologize for how I treated you during the marriage. You were nothing but good to my son, and I didn't appreciate it." Her apology surprised me. "Thank you for saying that. It means more than you know. He made a terrible mistake, leaving you. He knows that now." I smiled, not unkindly. "The past is the past, Patricia. I hope Marcus finds happiness, genuinely, but that chapter of my life is closed." She nodded, tears in her eyes. "You're a remarkable woman, Rebecca. My son was a fool. We parted ways, and I realized I meant what I said. I did hope Marcus found happiness. Not because I still cared about him romantically, but because holding on to anger was exhausting. Forgiveness wasn't about letting him off the hook. It was about freeing myself from the burden of bitterness. 5 years after selling everything to save Marcus's life, I looked around at what I had built and felt genuine pride. Phoenix Rising Jewelry employed 12 people. We donated 10% of profits to cancer research and domestic violence prevention. My designs had been featured in magazines. I owned my apartment and my car outright, no debt. But more than the financial success, I had built a life of meaning. Every piece of jewelry I created carried intention. Every workshop I taught empowered women. Every choice I made was mine, based on what I wanted, not what someone else needed. Jennifer and I were having coffee at our favorite spot when she asked me something that made me think. She said, "Do you ever regret it? Selling everything for him?" I thought carefully before answering. "No, I don't regret trying to save his life." That decision said something about who I am, about my capacity for love and sacrifice. What I regret is not valuing myself enough to see the warning signs that he wasn't worthy of that sacrifice. That's very mature of you. Maturity is just another word for expensive life lessons. She laughed. "You've earned every bit of wisdom you've got." She was right. My wisdom was hard-won, paid for in full with everything I owned and parts of my heart I didn't know could break. But I had come through the fire transformed, not destroyed. I started speaking at events for entrepreneurs and cancer support groups, sharing my story of loss, betrayal, and rebuilding. At first, it felt vulnerable and scary to stand in front of strangers and expose my wounds. But the response was always the same: gratitude, recognition, solidarity. My story gave other people permission to survive their own catastrophes. After one speaking event, a young woman approached me. She couldn't have been more than 25, with tired eyes that looked older than her years. She said, "My fiancé was just diagnosed with leukemia. We're supposed to get married in 3 months, and now everything is falling apart. How did you do it? How did you stay strong?" I took her hands. "You find strength you didn't know you had. You take it one day at a time. You ask for help when you need it, something I wish I had done more of. And you remember that loving someone through their darkest time is a choice you make every single day." What if I'm not strong enough? You are. Trust me, you are. The fact that you're here asking these questions proves it. She hugged me tight, crying on my shoulder. I held her, this stranger who was walking a path I knew too well, and I hoped my story could be a light in her darkness. That interaction reminded me of something important. My suffering hadn't been meaningless. It had given me empathy, understanding, and the ability to help others going through similar struggles. That didn't make what Marcus did okay, but it did mean something good had come from something terrible. David proposed to me on a quiet Sunday morning, no grand gestures or elaborate plans. We were in my apartment, drinking coffee and reading the newspaper, doing nothing special. He looked at me over the sports section and said he wanted to spend the rest of his life having these ordinary moments with me. I said yes, not because I needed to be married, but because I wanted to build a life with him. The distinction mattered. I wasn't trying to recreate what I lost with Marcus. I was creating something entirely new, built on a foundation of mutual respect, honest communication, and 2 whole people choosing each other. We had a small wedding in Jennifer's backyard, just close friends and family. No country club, no expensive dress, no pretense. Just love and commitment and the people who had stood by us through our individual storms. It was perfect. Carolyn, my mentor and friend, gave a toast that made everyone cry. She said, "I've watched Rebecca rise from the ashes of a life that would have destroyed most people. She didn't just survive, she thrived. She took her pain and turned it into purpose. That's not just resilience, that's alchemy. David, you're a lucky man. Rebecca, you've earned every bit of this happiness." I looked around at the faces of the people who had supported me, believed in me, and loved me when I couldn't love myself. This was my real wealth, not money or possessions, but relationships built on loyalty and genuine care. My business celebrated its 7th anniversary the same year I turned 40. 7 years since I started over from nothing. 7 years of building something meaningful. I threw a party at the shop, inviting customers, employees, friends, and family. The walls were covered with photos of jewelry pieces and the stories behind them. Each piece represented someone's journey of survival and transformation. Looking at those photos, I realized something profound. Marcus's betrayal had broken me, but it had also freed me. If he hadn't left, I would still be that woman who made herself small, who sacrificed without boundaries, who loved without wisdom. His leaving forced me to rebuild not just my life, but myself. That didn't make what he did right. It didn't excuse his cruelty or his cowardice, but it did mean that I had taken something ugly and used it as raw material to create something beautiful. That was my power, my choice, my victory. Maria, the woman from my workshops, had become an employee and dear friend. She pulled me aside during the party. She said, "You changed my life. You know that, right? You changed your own life. I just showed you it was possible." "No, you did more than that. You showed me that surviving isn't enough, that we can thrive after trauma, that our scars can become our strength." Her words filled me with purpose. This was why I did what I did, not for fame or fortune, but for the opportunity to light the path for other women walking through darkness. I heard through the grapevine that Marcus had health issues again. Not cancer this time, but serious enough to require treatment. I felt a twinge of concern, the muscle memory of being the person who cared for him, but I didn't reach out. That wasn't my role anymore. He had a wife, a life, a story that no longer included me. David noticed my distraction. "You okay?" "Yeah. Just thinking about how different my life could have been. Different isn't always better." He was right. If Marcus hadn't gotten sick, I probably would have stayed in that comfortable but ultimately unfulfilling life. If he hadn't left, I never would have discovered my own strength. If I hadn't lost everything, I never would have learned what actually mattered. The human capacity for resilience amazed me. I saw it in my customers, in my workshop participants, in myself. We break, but we also heal. We lose everything, but we rebuild. We trust, get betrayed, and somehow find the courage to trust again. On my 41st birthday, I sat in my workshop alone after everyone had gone home. I looked at the tools, the materials, the half-finished pieces waiting to be completed. This space was mine, earned through sacrifice and perseverance and refusal to give up. I thought about the woman I was 7 years ago, standing in that hospital hallway, terrified and determined to save her husband at any cost. I wanted to tell her so many things, that she was stronger than she knew, that the love she was giving wasn't being matched, that she should ask for help, that her worth wasn't measured by how much she could sacrifice. But I also wanted to thank her, because her choices, even the painful ones, led me here, to a life of purpose and meaning, to relationships built on reciprocity and respect, to a version of myself I actually liked, even loved. I picked up a piece of wire and started working, my hands moving through familiar motions. I was creating a new design, something I had been thinking about for weeks. A phoenix rising from flames, but this time the flames weren't consuming, they were transformative. The bird wasn't fleeing the fire, it was dancing in it, using the heat to forge something new. That was the real story, I realized. Not that I survived Marcus's betrayal, but that I used it as fuel for transformation. The fire that was meant to destroy me had instead burned away everything that wasn't essential, leaving only the truest version of myself. Jennifer stopped by as I was finishing the piece. She looked at it, understanding immediately what it represented. She said, "That's you. That's all of us. Every woman who's been through hell and chose to keep going." We sat together in comfortable silence, the kind that only exists between people who have seen each other at their worst and loved each other anyway. She had been there for every step of this journey, offering support I was often too proud to accept, staying present even when I pushed her away. I said, "Thank you for never giving up on me. That's what love does. Real love. It stays." Her words resonated deeply. Real love stays. Real love doesn't turn sacrifice into debt. Real love doesn't abandon you when things get hard. Real love celebrates your strength instead of feeling threatened by it. Marcus had taught me what love wasn't. David and Jennifer and Carolyn and Maria and countless others had shown me what love was. Both lessons were valuable, but the second set was the one I chose to build my life on. As I locked up the workshop that night, I felt at peace. Not because my life was perfect, it wasn't. I still had hard days and financial stress and moments of doubt. But I had built something real and lasting. I had turned my pain into purpose. I had survived, and more than that, I had learned to thrive. The girl who sold everything to save her husband's life was gone. In her place stood a woman who understood that the most important person to save was herself. A woman who knew her worth and refused to settle for less. A woman who could transform devastation into beauty, loss into meaning, betrayal into wisdom. I drove home through the city lights, past the hospital where this journey started, past the apartment where I had cried on Jennifer's couch, past the mall where Carolyn gave me a second chance. Each place held memories, both painful and precious. Together, they told the story of how I became who I was meant to be. David was waiting when I got home. Dinner on the table, that easy smile on his face. This was what real partnership looked like. Not grand gestures or dramatic sacrifices, but consistent presence and genuine care. Not someone who needed me to save them, but someone who chose to walk beside me as an equal. We ate dinner and talked about our days, the ordinary rhythm of a life built on solid ground. Later, as I got ready for bed, I caught my reflection in the mirror. I looked at myself, really looked, and I liked what I saw. Not because I was perfect or had it all figured out, but because I was authentic. I was mine. That night, I dreamed of phoenixes and fire, of transformation and rebirth. I woke up feeling ready for whatever came next, knowing that no matter what challenges life threw at me, I had the strength to face them. I had already survived my worst nightmare and come out stronger. The betrayal that nearly destroyed me had instead become the catalyst for becoming my truest self. Marcus had taken so much from me, but he couldn't take the most important thing, my ability to choose how my story ended. And I chose to end it not with bitterness, but with wisdom. Not with regret, but with gratitude for the lessons learned. Not as a victim, but as a victor. I sold everything to pay for his treatment. When he got better, he cheated and asked for a divorce. But that wasn't the end of my story. It was the beginning of the chapter where I discovered that I was enough, that I always had been, and that real strength comes not from holding on to what hurts us, but from letting it transform us into something better than we were before. And in the end, that transformation was worth every single thing I lost along the way.